Wow. Now, public education is in crisis, whatever people may tell you. The money is simply not there anymore. And in Ontario, well, they're proposing selling of schoolyards for private development. You can't play outside, kids, but teacher has a great pension. Look, it's really about nudity. Confused? No, hold on. The little boy suddenly shouted, "Look, the emperor doesn't have new clothes at all. He's naked, completely naked." And the people's eyes were opened and they too saw that the emperor was nude, and they now had the courage to stare and to laugh, which is really a very fine and fitting image to consider as the school year, well, the year, I suppose, comes to an end. Public education is utterly naked. Nothing new, nothing novel or naval. Nothing about which to boast. Mediocrity enshrined, money thrown away, learning thrashed and trashed, which is not to say that there are no outstanding teachers out there, of course, and there are lots of good kids in the classroom as well. We know that. It's self-evident. But it is to say that we all would be better off scrapping the entire public education system and allowing parents to spend their money on their children's education as they see fit. The system does not need to be tampered with. It needs to be destroyed. This is the only way to remove the destructive power of the teachers' unions, not teachers, the teachers' unions, allow bad teachers, and there are some, to be fired, and empower the better ones, the majority, to promote excellence. And to end the silly mythology that has held us back for so long. In doubt? Well, here's a list just for starters. Large class sizes are a problem. It's a ghostly fetish that has to be exorcised. They are invariably irrelevant and are used as an excuse by incompetent teachers. There were really large classes for years in Canadian schools, and they produce literate, civilised young people. It's less the number of people in the class than the quality of the person in charge of the class. Kids get along and are socialised in public schools. Oh, that's nonsense, you know that. Wealthy people live in wealthy areas and send their children to schools attended by offspring of other wealthy people. Unless they're really left-wing and the kids go to enormously expensive private schools. Stephen Lewis and Michelle Landsberg sending son Avi, hello Avi Lewis, to Upper Canada College. 25, 30 grand a year is a good example. Like grasps to like. Ethnic groups do sometimes mix in public schools, but there are groups and gangs and all sorts of segregation. Have a look, you'll see. As for socialisation, it's largely meaningless. And anyway, children are socialised in all sorts of places. It's not the job of schools to socialise, but to educate. Some of the most mature and well-adjusted young people, believe me, are homeschooled. Children are not indoctrinated into any religion or ideology in the public system. Oh, that's utter rubbish. Moral relativism and sexual deviancy are core values now, and to not believe in them is to be a heretic worthy of metaphorical flames. Secular humanism, a religion, has become aggressively fundamentalist within the public school system. Kids receive a first-class education in public schools. Oh, please, pass the medication, darling. I'm going to pass out. Too little homework, too few expectations, an acceptance of the down market and a fear of challenging kids, and, God forbid, failing them. Again, lots of great teachers, but public education was supposed to end illiteracy. Well, it did, but that was many years ago. For a generation now, the slide has been the other way, and teenagers are being accepted into universities without the ability to spell basic words and with no grasp of concepts, history, or original thought. Ask people who teach at universities. The public system is free. No, it's not. No way. It costs a fortune and is extravagant and inefficient. It is bureaucratic and political and fails pupils, parents and teachers who want to do the right thing. Naked. Absolutely naked. Get dressed and grow up, and you know what? Give us back our cash. Students can be very annoying. Actually, students probably should be very annoying. They always have been. You go back to medieval England, medieval Europe, and town and gown, huge fights between students and people who actually did real jobs. And that's all okay. It's part of being a young person at a university. But today, something has happened the past 40 years or so, and it's really very intense now, where freedom of speech is so curtailed and so limited, and venues that should be just bursting with different ideas of left and right have become small enclosed areas where only a radical left opinion is to be tolerated. John Carpay, President, Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms, joins us from Calgary. John, always a pleasure to have you on the show. You fight many of these cases. You represent kids. Is it really difficult today? I mean, are young people at university told there's only one opinion you're allowed to have?
Frequently, that's what it boils down to. Universities will never admit to that. They will always claim to be a place that welcomes diversity of thought. But in practice, when it comes to certain controversial issues, particularly abortion, but it's not limited to that, it could be Israeli apartheid, the university tends to squelch any controversy. They love to justify their censorship on the basis of safety and security. And it becomes a bit of a vicious circle, because if you shut down controversial speech on grounds of safety and security, then you have less debate, which makes people less able to engage in debate, and it's a downward spiral.
Yeah, well, we hear this argument applied a great deal of the time, not just at university. Well, because of the safety and security of people, we can't allow you to speak your mind. And what happens, particularly with leftists and Islamic groups, is if they make enough noise and provoke enough violence and threaten enough people, they win the argument by default. But the job of a university, surely, in a civilized society, is to make sure that even a minority opinion is protected.
Absolutely, and that's where the failure of universities frequently, it's not so much in the universities actively censoring things, although we do see examples of that, but an equally large or larger problem is where the university fails to provide the necessary security to uphold free speech rights. Yeah. So you see, for example, Christy Blatchford, at that time with the Globe, now back with the National Post, was speaking at a university on her book on the Caledonia situation, and there are 3 or 4 protesting hecklers that chained themselves to a chair on stage and shut down the event entirely, and campus security stood by and watched. So that is equally, that is as big of a problem when universities don't uphold the free speech rights by having adequate security present to take care of the disruptors and the hecklers. That is as much a threat to free speech as is active censorship.
Yeah. Look, I was at a speech a while back, and a woman approached me, a very nice woman, a mum, and she said that her son had gone to a university in southern Ontario, and the professor had said, "Put your hands up if you're Christian." And he was the only one who put his hand up. And the professor said to him, not in a vicious way, but he said, "I guarantee you by the end of this year, you won't be." And then he set up to just intimidate this boy, both intellectually, but in other ways too. And in the end, the kid just dropped out. Now, if the professor had said, "Put your hand up if you're an atheist, by the end of this year, I guarantee you won't be," you know what would have happened. This was a direct attack on a person whose faith or whose idea or whose position or ideology is currently not fashionable.
Well, that's why you see so much tolerance and latitude towards the so-called Occupy movement, because it's perceived to be left-wing, so it's politically correct. So people come up with this absurd notion that your charter right to freedom of expression includes a right to physically occupy premises, and when that's not the case at all. But there's way more sympathy, of course, for the left-wing perspective at universities. Having said that, there's also been a little bit of censorship here and there against the use of the expression Israeli apartheid, which I find it an offensive term and I disagree with it. However, as an advocate for freedom of expression, I think if that's the term that people want to use to articulate their viewpoint on Israel, then their freedom of speech should mean that you can say Israeli apartheid. And so there have been some instances of universities banning or prohibiting that expression or that term. And that, of course, is also censorship that is bad.
I agree with you. I mean, I don't know of any universities that have said you can't use the term. What I have heard of universities saying you can't have an Israeli apartheid week where you have this part of the university, you have it on university property. If you want to use the term, use it, but you can't then rent a room and bring in speakers underneath that premise. But I agree with you. I think we have to be consistent here. I don't think we can have just a free speech for some. But as you know better than I do, most of the victims, of course, are kids who are Christian, pro-life, Jewish, pro-Israel, more traditional. It's so sad it's happening on university campuses. But just very briefly, about 20 seconds to go. Is your workload increasing or is it getting smaller? I suspect the former.
It's increasing, but I'm hopeful in the long run. The Justice Center is producing an annual Campus Freedom Index, and we have assigned letter grades from A to F.
Forgive me, I'm not censoring you, but we're out of time. Anyway, glad you're there. You're doing wonderful work. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.